Hello, my name is Sabrina Roberts, and I'll be your instructor for this semester. Today, we're going to take a closer look at Chapter 1 and explore communication, what is communication, and basic communication theories. Let's begin. So, you may be in this course because you are a communication studies major, you're curious about communication studies, or you're a communications minor. But why do we study communication? Well, communication is relevant throughout each and every day of our lives. But we do have communication challenges with it in different spheres, such as interpersonal, professional, public speaking, and we study it to face these challenges. But communication is relevant to every part of our lives. So, communication, just like any skill, can be learned, you can grow, and it can be cultivated. So for those who communicate well, we have advantages in our personal, social, civic, and professional lives. We're going to be exploring these different types of communication competencies in this semester. But first, let's define what communication is. Communication is a systemic process in which people interact with and through symbols to create and interpret messages. So we're going to break down several definitions, such as interact, symbols, and interpret meanings. So notice that the definition just didn't focus on talking, talking or writing. It's broad enough to encompass different types of communication and different types of symbols and different types of ways that we share messages with each other. So let's break down some features of communication. First, it's a process that's ongoing and dynamic. You are never not communicating. And then we are within different spheres and different systems. So for example, you are a system within your family, within your professional organization, within your college, within your class. So you are a part of something bigger. So when we think about systems, we think of the openness, which is the extent that a system is affected by the outside environment, and establishing homeostasis, a state of equilibrium. When we think about homeostasis, you've probably heard of that in a biological sense. When we think about that in communications, we're trying to find balance. We're trying to find mm, homeostasis maybe in emotions or making sure that we're heard or making sure that we are understood. So making sure that in the attempt to make sure that we are getting homeostasis, we employ different types of communication strategies to do so in the form of symbols and meanings. So when we think of words, the words that we use and the words that we write, and the multiple languages that we have, because some of us are bilingual. I would love to be like bilingual as well, so that's one goal of life of mine. But when we think of words within themselves, they're arbitrary and they represent phenomena in the world. However, what gives symbols and words power are the meanings behind them. So we can have two attributions to the different meanings of our words. First, the literal message. For instance, what is being said, directions, a type of message that doesn't have any deeper meanings than what is being said. So, for example, if you say, I'm going to the store, hand me that glass of water, turn off that light, it's very clear, literal messages that you're sending. However, there's also communication that helps repair, define, and strengthen relationships. So when we talk about expressing relationships, we might talk about how we feel about someone. We might want to define a romantic relationship. We might want to declare someone our best friend. These conversations are more layered, more nuanced, and they are built to build and bring relationships together. Next, we're going to talk about the different models of communication. Now, just like any other theory, this has evolved over time. When you think about how to interact with theories, whether in this class or another class, think about people or researchers defining phenomena that are already out there. It'll make it less intimidating. First, we have the linear model of communication. So we're trying to define the parts of a conversation, if you will, or parts of a communication interaction. In the linear model, if you can imagine a sender sending a message to the receiver, but think about it as one singular arrow. These are the very basic and rudimentary parts of the communication model. But of course, there's so much more to communication than that. So, what the interactive model communication builds upon, it takes into account that we give feedback, both verbal and nonverbal, and we are in the process of interpreting and creating feedback to send to the other person. So with feedback, we encode and decode the message. We take into consideration who's the source of that information. We craft our message, and both sender and receiver are doing the same thing. So it builds upon the linear model, and we're going to look at the pictures of what that looks like in a minute, and then we will go over the transactional communication model. Let me move myself. So as you see here in the linear model, we have the sender, the message, the channel, which is the means in which the message is communicated. For example, verbally, text, email, video, and other ways. Notice there is noise. So what is noise and why is it throughout each model? So noise can be an external noise or it can be an internal noise. So think about the 8 o'clock class that you have, and you didn't eat breakfast and you stayed up late that night. So while your professor is giving the lecture, it's a little bit hard to pay attention because you're hungry, you're sleepy, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I wish I could go ahead and take a nap and I can go ahead and eat something, but I have to be here until class is dismissed. In that case, the noise is internal. You are, the internal dialogue is blocking the capacity for you to pay attention to the message. If you notice that in the interactive model of communication, we do take into account there is a receiver, but also notice that it's still singular, that there's one message, one sender sending the message, and they're giving feedback, but they don't necessarily take into account that the receiver is going through the same process of encoding and decoding the message. For the transactional model of communication, we take into account that both the sender and receiver are both encoding and decoding the messages at the same time. They're both experiencing feedback. They're both are speaking within a particular context. If we think about context, we think about the environment in which communication is taking place. That can include the actual space and the time. Think about synchronous and asynchronous communication and how it influences how the message is received. Imagine going back and forth via text messages and trying to figure out what a person means, and that meaning can be quickly interpreted if you were communicating face to face. So in the transactional communication model, we are, excuse me, we are taking into account that both communicators are interacting at the same time versus having just one sender send a message. So this is represented by the arrows. So here are some more characteristics of the transactional communication model. It captures the dynamics of human interaction. Communication changes over time. I've mentioned asynchronous and synchronous communication as well, and how that influences communication. So the communication techniques change if you're in the same room or if you're speaking at the same time because you can catch tone and inflection and context a little bit more clearly. Both engage in symbolic interactions. They have a shared field of experience because they're talking about the same thing, and they are experiencing the interaction either at the same time or at different times, and can experience both external and internal noise that can impede on the communication process. Finally, we're going to talk about careers in communication. So we're going to explore this a little bit more in chapter 2 and in the subsequent assignments where you explore your career aspirations in the course and within the communication studies field. So some careers can be in research, education, just like I'm doing right now. You can do communication related work for nonprofit organizations, create mass communication such as journalism, influencer related content, social media. You can also do training consulting for others, do broadcasting, public relations and advertising, and work for businesses in human relations and management. Communication studies majors work well in these fields. I'll give you an example. So I initially received my bachelor's of communications and my emphasis was in public relations. And although I taught and tutored during that time, so I always had an interaction with education throughout my career, I also have experience in social media management and advertising and in public relations through internships and other positions. I decided a while ago that education was the field that I want to go into, but there's so many fields that fit with the communication because just like we talked about before, communication is in everything. We can't escape it. We're human beings. However, with communication, you can pivot to other roles and use the skills that you gained in the process of education and internships to do whatever you like. The world is your oyster. And we're going to explore those things in the next chapter and the subsequent assignments, such as the career exploration paper and the resume assignment. We defined communication, looked at three important communication studies models, and I just explained some of the career paths for those who study communication. Thank you so much for listening and thank you so much for being in the class. I can't wait to see what you learned and I can't wait to see what career paths that you might be interested in. And I can't wait for you to explore what communication studies have to offer. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.